So thank you for agreeing to meet with us today.
No, there's no trouble at all. It's good to get this sort of thing down for the future. People won't remember Waterford as it was, and when they don't remember what it was like, then they have no reference point. And when they have no reference point, it's just you're dealing with the present time. But the past is equally as important. What questions were you going to ask me anyway?
I suppose a good starting point from that would be, what are the biggest changes for you now looking back in Waterford from growing up?
Right. There was lots of changes that I would remember. Children used to play on the street. There was neighbourhoods. And by neighbourhoods I mean people lived in the area. In the old part of Waterford City, there are now very few people living in the area. I was born in Arundel Square, which would be the old Norman part of Waterford. It was just outside the Viking Triangle. And when Waterford was extended under the Normans, that was included into the city at that stage. And I was born in 1943. And from that time up to the time I got married, I lived in Arundel Square. Arundel Square was a thriving place at that stage. We could field 2 football teams. The football teams were made up of families that lived in the area, mainly the Fitzgeralds, the Halpins, the Troys, and then their pals would come in and they'd play football between the 2 gates. One was Knox's gate on one side of the street, and the other gate was Flanagan's on the other side of the street. And they'd play there. As I said, you could have 2 football teams. That's 22 children. Now you could go up into Arundel Square and you wouldn't even see a child. And more particular, after 6:30 at night, that area becomes very, very quiet. And you know, just to diverse from that, that's why we're bringing in the purple flag to prove that Waterford, that part of the city, is a very safe part of the city. But you asked me a question, what were the changes I would see in the city? That's the biggest change that I would see in the city. A lot of the old indigenous shops are gone. Now, mainly that area is boutiques, small cafes, a couple of big department stores. Where we had the Butland store and Quinlan's had fruit and vegetable and egg store. No, that's the City Square shopping centre. At the top of that area, you had Dunlop's, which was now the Brasserie Cafe, or what would you call it? I suppose bistro would be the proper word to use for it. All down Peter Street is now absorbed into Roche's stores, which became Debenhams. You have, is it Super King? Burger King, is it? I don't know, at the top of the square. Then that leads down into a number of small shops down into Peter Street, down at the back of the ferry. All that was a business area, and people that would have lived in that area would have remembered the Coca-Cola depot over there in Peter Street. The Troys of Peter Street, all the tenements in Peter Street. There was houses over there that were 3 stories high, and numerous families living in those houses. I think there was about 5 of them along in a row, and great people. But we've got so used to suburbia that all that type of dwelling is gone out of the centre of the city. And with the dwelling gone out of the centre of the city, so has the living population gone out of the centre of the city. That would be one of the biggest things. A lot of the old shops that I mentioned originally, they're long gone. Along the quay, You would have a number of old shops. Shaws would be there. When I was young, that was called Robinson Ledley's. Hearn's, which was a similar type of shop, department store, that's gone out of it. Johnny Hearn's Ironmongery, that's gone. Kelly's, which was a high fashion lady store, that has changed into a shoe boutique. Coming up Broad Street, you might remember just where Mulligan's was a place called the 50 Shilling Tailors. And it was called the 50 Shilling Tailors because you could buy a suit for 50 shillings. In today's terms, 50 shillings would be €3 probably, or €4, 50 cents.
Wow.
So, when you look back, and I'd never classify myself as being old. I'm 72 years of age, but by God, I'm a young 72. Where are all the children gone out of the centre of the city? It's like Hamlin. Someone was a Pied Piper and took all the children out of the centre of the city. It would be great to see them back there. And with children coming back there, you would have families and you would have a living city again. That's the biggest change.
And what would the city centre have been like after 6 p.m? You said it's very quiet now. But what would have happened?
Right. Well, at that time, you had that was the main shopping area because people, cars were a rarity. Vans, delivery vans, they were a rarity. So people walked around the centre of the city. They did what window shopping, as we used to call it when I was growing up. You'd have couples walking along the quay looking into Shaw's window. And if you caught a couple looking into Heine's window, you knew that they were going to get engaged because they were looking at the rings. The boy might have been looking at the watches, but the girl was definitely looking at the rings. That's gone. As I said, window shopping was the thing, and the lights of the shops were blazing. All the shop window lights were on, which is a sad thing today. There's very little display windows in that area now, lit at night. A great thing when I was growing up, there was 3 main cafes, as we called them, and if you wanted to impress a girl in those days, you took her for a Coke to one of the cafes, or she might have a coffee, which was luxury in those days because from up to, we say, mid-50s, coffee was really unheard of. Up to the 50s, the rationing were still on after the war. So, to go for a coffee now and all the different types of coffee there is today, they were unheard of. You were lucky to get instant coffee, which was Nescafe, and it came in a small little tin, and might get a pot of tea, a scone, or something like that. And then all of a sudden, this newfangled gadget came out, Cadbury's Club Milks. And a coffee and a club milk, perfect. It was a great way of sitting down with a girl in a cafe. That you really had her impressed if you could bring her for a coffee to the Lido or the Odeon Cafe. And then you had Mackey's Cafe on the quay. So there was, there was people moving around. Then you had the Savoy Cinema. Savoy Cinema was really the hub of activity in that area, Broad Street area. And I remember the Regina Cinema, which was owned by the Breen family. I remember that being built. And while we're talking there, I was just trying to think, what was the first film that they showed? I have it, High Society was the first film that was shown in the Regina Cinema. And the queues, people would queue to get into the cinema in those days, even though that there were continuous shows. They started at, we say, 3 o'clock, and you finished, we say, about 5:30 or 6 o'clock. Then you had one from, we say, 5:30 until 8 o'clock, and then you had another one from 8 o'clock until 10:30. And you have to remember that the pubs closed at that time at 10:30. So people were going home at 10:30. The area would have been dead at 11 o'clock because people were in bed. You had no cars, so quietness reigned. It was a totally different world to today. When I think I was about 15, I think I was, when the Arundel Ballroom opened up, and huge crowds went to the Arundel Ballroom. You heard me talking about the brasserie. That was the Arundel Ballroom, and later on it became a factory for Dunlops, and they manufactured shoes, tennis shoes, in that particular ballroom. Big changes up there. On the other side of the street, you had John Power's garage. They selling cars early in the day, and again they closed about 7 o'clock at night. You had Hearn and Coll's, which manufactured shoes in Arundel Square. It was like a small factory in its day. So you had activity, which is necessary to get back into the centre of the city. Coming way down Michael Street, you had a hive of small shops. The biggest shop in Michael Street at that time was Boyce's. They had 2 shops in Michael Street, a clothes shop on one side and a general clothes shop on the other side. Coming down there, they were the 2 big shops. You had a good small little family shops, like they'd be called huckster shops today, but they created employment. They might have had only 1 or 2 employed in the shop, but they were well-run shops, and you got good value for your money. On the other side, you had Stokes's wallpaper shop, paint and wallpapers. Again, people used to throng into those because up to, we say, the 50s, people couldn't afford wallpaper. The walls were distempered. And the 3 colours that I remember of distemper was a Virgin Mary blue, a vivid pink, and a very lime green. But they were the colours that the houses were painted in those days. And then wallpaper came in, and it became less and less expensive. So people started wallpapering their houses. Luxury. You didn't know what luxury was until then. Again, there was no such thing as carpet on the floor. It was lino. These are the things that spring to my mind. Coming way down Michael Street, you had the apple market. And one of the greatest activities on the apple market was Sunday morning, with the band playing on Sunday morning in the apple market. And you would have families there with children listening to the music on a Sunday morning. Again, you had a number of pubs in that area. In the apple market area, you had Culnan's pubs. He also had a chemist shop down further on. You had Jeff's pub, Jeff Power's pub. And coming down towards the car stand, you had 3 or 4 pubs there. You had Sean Sexton, it was called the 24 Bar. You had the Gaelic Bar. You had the Central Bar and Dawson's. They're all gone, aren't they? It's amazing the changes in that. You had another question you wanted to ask me. What had you in mind?
Yeah, so with the bars closing at 10, the bars wouldn't have played as much a part in the so, and this actually might be a good time. What kind of time are we running on there?
It cut off already and I already started.
Oh, sorry, so go on.
Yeah,
But thank you very much. On the ball, he's on the ball. With the pubs closing at, you said they closed at around 10. So the pubs weren't part of the nightlife.
Oh, there was no nightlife. That's why you were born. Nightlife was in the house. And one customer said to me how things have changed. Now the adults are going home when the children are going out. Nightlife consisted of the family home. Cinemas ended at, as I said, about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. You had come down in this area, and I mentioned the Arundel Ballroom. They had what they call all-night dances, and all-night dances went on about 2:30. But they were a rarity because people didn't have the money to go dancing. It was only in the 50s, the late 50s, that you had the likes of big bands like the Royal Show Band. And they had to have them later on, the dances going later on, to give people value for money. A dance at that time could cost you £0.50. And this is at a time when I'm talking about a week's wages being £10, 13 and 4pence, which is the equivalent today of about €15. So you can imagine if you were going to a dance and it was costing you £0.50, you thought twice about going to the dance. And if you fancied a girl, you'd always say, "Oh, I'll see you inside. I might be late. I might be working late." But that was only a blind. You just didn't have the money to pay for the girl going into the dance. Young fellas of when I was that age, back in the 60s, I was probably the early 60s. I was 17, we'll say, and a young fella at 17 would be lucky to be earning £2 a week, and that would be for a 48-hour week. So by the time he had given his mother some money at home, he had very little pocket money for himself, and he knew how to spend that pocket money, I can tell you. You asked me about nightlife. There wasn't nightlife as we know it today. And I'm not sure, maybe it's the age breaking out of me, but I'm not sure that nightlife as it stands today is a good thing for society. What does nightlife consist of today? It consists of either going to the pub until we say closing time at 11:30, and then going on to a nightclub from, we say, 12 o'clock until 2:30 in the morning. And what's there to do in the nightclub that there wasn't to do in dance halls years ago? You went to the nightclub to meet a girl if you were a fella, and vice versa. If you were a girl, you went to the nightclub to meet a boy. But the main factor in going to the nightclub, the main driving economic force behind a nightclub was drink. And now drink plays such a huge part in nightlife. That didn't happen in my time. Drink was there. There was a lot more pubs in Waterford City. I can remember 67 pubs closing in Waterford City, never to open again. People had asked me where they are. Well, that would take a whole television programme, a whole radio programme by itself to remember where those pubs are. We as a family at one time had 3 pubs in Waterford City. There was, where I was born in Arundel Square, was the Arundel Inn. We built another bar down by the side of it. It was called the Beer and Bite. And my father had bought O'Hanlon's and changed it to the Wonder Inn in 1959. So there's only one bar left today in the Aylward family, and that's called the Wonder Inn. The other two are closed up and made into shops. Across the road we had Mrs. Murray, the Abbey Bar, that's gone. You know, you can, if you sat down and started talking about it, people, you'd have to have a map to show the younger people where the bars were. They would remember the mansion. They would remember, we say, Peg O'Mara's. They would remember Davy Mack's. Then they would remember Chef's, which is now Eden. They would remember Mason's. As I said, that was Davy Mack's. But the younger generation wouldn't remember a huge number of the pubs that I would remember closing. Nightlife. The sad part about nightlife, when I was growing up, you never drank at home. A parent wouldn't dream of drinking in front of his children when I was growing up. Now it seems to be the norm for people to go to, we say, Tesco and buy a slab of cans and drink them in the home before going out to the nightclub. And if people would know that I'm in Johnstone in Wonder Inn, to see the people passing up at, when I'm closing the doors at, we say, 11:30, 11:45, and they're passing up the street after drinking quite a bit at home, because you knew they had drink taken. They would be quite boisterous, they would be loud. Children of that age when I was growing up, or teenagers of that age when I was growing up, there was no such thing as loud talk on the street, because people were in bed at that stage. They were asleep. So there was, if you were going to a dance in the Olympia and were going home at, we say, 12 o'clock at night, you did it very quietly. You didn't want someone saying, oh, I saw Johnny Aylward going home the other night and he's shouting his head off, because you get a boot up the backside from your father the following morning if he found out about it. That's the sad thing I see about society today, the change in respect for other people. You asked me about nightlife. What other nightlife is there today except the nightclub?
What role would drink have played then? Because if the bars were closing at 10,
right,
and there wasn't a drinking culture, where did the bar fit into society?
Oh, there was a drinking culture, but the drinking culture consisted not of guzzling drink. The drinking culture consisted of people going out to the bar to meet like-minded people, have a conversation, play cards, play darts. There wasn't nightclubs in it when I was growing up. So the bar was the social centre. It was a place that people went to, as I said, to meet friends, to talk to them. I don't know if you ever heard the saying, the most dangerous person in the world is a barroom liar. And by God, there was some liars when I was growing up. They knew more about the law than some solicitors, I can tell you anyway. No, they were conversations, sing-songs, cards, darts. There was great social activity. People spoke to each other in pubs. I've seen people coming into the pubs. They would order their drink, go down to the table, and what's the first thing they would do? They would look at their iPhone, and they would be on their iPhone there. The friend on the other side was on her or his iPhone, and they were tapping away. No conversation, which is a sad thing, because if you haven't conversation, it's grand repeating what you already know. You know what you're saying. But it's only when you listen to someone else, you might get a different slant on that. So conversation was very essential. Now people, they talk. They literally talk on iPhones. I wonder will people lose their use of their voice eventually? That won't happen to me, as you can see. No, you asked me about the bar. The traditional bar will be there, and will be there for a long time to come. Eventually it will swing around. We've all seen changes in the pub business, and the biggest change that I can see in the pub business was a couple of changes. Smoking ban. That was a big change. It was a culture shock for the pubs. Gone are the days when you walked into a pub and you walked into a pea soup or fog. That's gone out of the pub. It's a pity that the government didn't think it through and allow some internal smoking area, a smoking room, where, again, I wouldn't encourage people to be drinking in the smoking room. If you wanted a cigarette, you went into the smoking room and kept the smoke away from people. It's a pity they didn't allow that. It's a shame to see people going out on the street. I think it's demeaning to be out on the street smoking. Some of the pubs have gone and put in very elaborate smoking areas. And smoking areas with bar facilities in them. While it's a great benefit for the people that are smoking, again, it has the disadvantage of being miserable during the winter time and miserable during bad weather. It doesn't encourage smoking, which is a good thing in my view. I never smoked, and I'm a bar person for, I suppose at this stage, the best part of 40 odd years. So I never smoked. That would have been a big thing. Another good thing that happened is when they brought in the drink driving laws. They brought in those. Now, it wasn't the farmer that knew the value of his car that was the problem. It was young people that were, again, were working in factories, had good money, and were able to buy good cars, good, fast cars. And I would tell you straight out, and I'm, as a publican, I would hold my hand up and say that drink driving should never happen. When they had the limit at I think it was 80 cc's per so many cc's of blood, the accidents were dropping, particularly fatal accidents were dropping. I think they should have left it at that. It will never come back. We hear of people were following suit with Europe. Right, fine, we're following suit with Europe, but we have a different culture in Ireland. I don't know, Europeans seem to handle drink better than we do. I would never like to see a drunk person in my bar. A tipsy person, yes. But a person that knows where to draw the line, he's the one. If you are socialising in a pub, you don't want a person that's drunk alongside you. So a good bar person will always say, and people would know, it's time for a cup of tea. And that would be my way of handling it. Johnny, I think it's time now you got something to eat. No offence is taken by it. It's a simple way of telling the person that he'd want to cop himself on. And if it's done in a fit and proper manner, no offence will ever be taken by that. One thing that I do notice about the bar, there are some very, very good professional bar people around, but there is also a lot of young people serving young people, and they don't know when to take responsibility. That's a sad thing. Because if you lose control in a bar, then the bar is destined for oblivion eventually. It might do well for a couple of years, but in my view, it's only going to be a short-term affair.
And working in the bars over the years, would there be any particular characters or Waterford celebrities?
Yeah, that was great characters. Pubs were alive with characters. One character that always springs to my mind is Tom the Liar, Tom Sullivan. He knew people called him Tom the Liar because he told the most outrageous stories, great stories. One that I remember well, I was only after starting Coca-Cola. I think it was around 1961. And I went to the Royal Bar. And the Royal Bar was nothing like the Royal Bar it was before it closed up. It was a small, it was like a small hotel bar. But the barman, Tom, and another person was sitting around the fire when I came in. And it was the most miserable day. The water was dripping out of my coat. And Tom looked up at me and he said, God, look at that young fella. And I was driving a lorry at this stage, you know. He said, it reminds me of the day the captain of the Great Western came in. I could see he was in bad humour. I said to him, Captain, what's wrong? Oh, leave me alone now, Tom. He said, leave me alone. I am in bad humour. The aerial is after coming off the mast down below. The engineer won't go up and fix it in the rain. I said, stay where you are, Captain. I went into the house. I put on my wet weather gear. I put a pliers in one pocket. I put a screwdriver in the other. I came in. I said, come on, Captain. I went down, climbed the mast of the boat, got the aerial in one hand, got the insulator in the other hand, wrapped the aerial around the insulator, held it with the pliers and tightened it with the screwdriver. I shouted down, is it working, Captain? And he shouted back up at his Tom. And when I came down, wanted the boat gone. That was the sort of story that Tom used to tell. He had a string of stories. If you were to tell half the stories, you'd be here all day talking about Tom. A lovely one. He was there another day down on the Hulk, down where the marina is at present. And he said, this car pulled up. No roof on the car. He said this American had more stuff in the back of the car than they had in the sports shop window. He said to me, Tom, is there any fish in that river? I said, look at that young fellow over there with a bamboo pole and a bent pin. He's pulling in salmon bass to beat the band. Well, he got out the rod. And after about 20 times casting out this rod, he said to me, God, that young fellow must have all the fish. I said, give me that rod, sir. I got the rod, leaned back on it. I cast it out. It went in through the first window of the boat club, came out through the second window of the boat club. Wasn't Flanagan's fish lorry passing at the time, and when I reeled it in, I had a salmon on it. He was gifted at telling stories, and people would sit by the fire in the Royal Bar listening to Tom telling stories. That was one character. And another character around the town was Mikey Moore. And I love another story about Mikey Moore. Mikey Moore was a man that never begged for anything in his life, but he always put himself in the way of getting a little handout from the right people. And he was up outside Hips, which people might remember Aylward at the bottom of Barrack Street. And he was standing at Burton's Corner, we used to call it. He was standing there, and wasn't Father Cody coming up from the church, the cathedral church. And not Tom, but Paddy went across the road, and he was just going to say hello to Father Cody when the Angelus bell rang. Saved by the bell, Father Cody blessed himself real slow, and Mikey pulled a tussle in front of his chest. After a few minutes, Mikey pulled the same tussle, and Father Cody, a few seconds later, blessed himself, and he looked at Mikey, and he said, God, Mikey has said that very quick. "Oh, practice, father," he said. These were the sort of characters, simple, no such thing as anything suggestive in their demeanour. They were great characters. You asked me about places that are gone missing out of Waterford. One place that springs to my mind straight away was Denny's Bacon Factory. And today you see Denny's sausages, Denny's gold medal sausages in every supermarket in town, but they're gone out of Waterford City. They were up above where the hypermarket was in the Glen. But Colonel Hetherington, a man, no, and I think his name was Silcock. Both of those were coming down Patrick Street, and Mikey saw him coming down Patrick Street, and he jumped to attention and he shouted, "Morning, Colonel!" And the Colonel called him over and he said, "Mikey, don't be calling out my name like that in public." He put his hand in his pocket and gave him a half-crown. And he looked at Mikey and he said, "Mikey, I suppose you're going to cure yourself." "Oh, God knows, sir. No, sir. There's only one crowd that can cure anything in this town, and that's Denny's Bacon Factory." Sure, poor Colonel Henderson had to put his hand in his pocket and give him another half-crown. They were great characters, great characters. And Mikey lived over in a laneway. People might remember it was the ESB office over in O'Connell Street. And it was my father and Johnny that built that office. It was built for a wholesale fruit business. And Mikey lived up a laneway that was at the side of that, which became the Snow Cream Dairy Factory on the top of Thomas's Hill. There's a thing that's gone out of Waterford City. Snow Cream. Snow Cream moved from there out to Glenville and bought the house and estate that was owned by Sir Ernest Goff out there. And they put the Snow Cream Factory, built the Snow Cream Factory on the grounds of the garden. And now that's gone. There's so many places gone out of Waterford, it's unbelievable. The tops of the town comes to my mind straight away. In 1961, there was 14 competing teams in the tops of the town. You had the teachers, you had the Post and Telegraph, you had Clover Meats, you had the Iron Foundry, you had the Second Bag Factory, you had the Waterford Glass, you had the Port and Docks. They're just some of them. But I remember 14 because I was in London in 1961 and I flew back from London for the tops of the town. It was the greatest variety show that ever was put on in this country. Looking at all those, they were great, brilliant things in those days. Brilliant factories employing maybe 50 people. But it was the number of these factories that gave Waterford its vitality. A lot of those factories are long gone. We mourn the passing of Waterford Crystal, Waterford Glass. I remember lots of factories like Waterford Glass, maybe not as big an employer as Waterford Glass, but at one stage Clover Meats had every bit the same number working over there as Waterford Crystal had. But people didn't get paid as much. The work wasn't as intense. You look at Waterford City and you say, where are all the factories gone? We have an estate outside there, and if it wasn't for a few major factories, it would be a derelict site. We need to get employment back into Waterford City. I always maintained there was 5 driving forces for Ireland, not to mind Waterford. The farmers, the fishermen, manufacturing industry, manufacturing export industry, tourism, and the financial services. Tourism is flying in Waterford. We have a great product in the Viking Triangle. It covers from the Viking era straight through to the Edwardian era. Brilliant. 3 different museums. Plenty for tourists coming into the city. But unfortunately, they should be open later at night. So tourism is flying. Manufacturing industry. If it wasn't for IT in Waterford, we would be very limited. So we need to get manufacturing industry. I'm not talking about, it can be any type of manufacturing industry. Industry where manufacturing, in my mind, is where you use your mind. IT is a perfect example of that. There are a good number of people in Waterford that have started up IT businesses and made them very successful. We need more research and more development in that line. The farmers, well, we know the farmers are like the publicans. They were never satisfied. They were always complaining. This was that. The publicans were no better. We were always complaining. We had good times. We have lean times at present. But we will come back. The farmers will come back. Livestock industry is brilliant at present. Board Bia are doing a brilliant job there. Waterford and the hinterland around Waterford is perfect agricultural land, so they will thrive. Financial services, well, enough said about them. They crippled us with their bad formula for success. It was a bad formula. It reminds me of Germany after the war, before the war, when Hitler built everything and then couldn't pay for his expansion. We ran into the same trouble. We built everything and couldn't pay for the upkeep of it and expansion. We saw it. We left a very bad legacy to the next generation. But what can you say about Waterford? It will come back. I won't be here to see it, but I sincerely hope that my children will see it, and I hope that the younger generation will appreciate what the effort that they will have to make. I think we've nearly covered everything.
How are we getting on today?
You can.
Lunch as well before.
Oh yeah, of course.
You can, right?
I think we've gone through most of that.
I think I tried to cover them when you weren't asking the questions. I tried to.
You had them in your head. Yeah, that's really comprehensive. It's really good going through.
Yeah, it is.
The only bit we went for, is it 2 or half 2 now we need to be back in? 2. And it's half 1 now.
Yeah.
Okay, no, we do need to go and get food then.
Come on, I'll be sacked. My wife will have to get the 3 o'clock bus.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much for speaking with us, John.
Okay, right.
Very
Come on, go home.